What t-shirts we wearing today? Here's mine. I like yours, Monty.
What have we got going on there?
Witch burnings.
Blueberry mead.
I'm just drinking oolong tea.
Things just got super weird. It's my time to shine.
Time for your dicks to shine.
Oh my gosh.
That's radiation. You should get that looked at.
I wanted to get at least like an introduction to their penis from each of the three. So now we've heard what? That's what this is about.
Guess who's here? Hi.
Hello.
Another foreskin. Oh.
Yay.
His wrist fight.
He's like, I'm out of here. Yay.
Now I'm even tinier.
Is that what you said, Monty? My vagina smells like sulfur. Is that a play on Gwyneth Paltrow's candle? It smells like Oh, I have one of those too, Monty. I only have one though. I have the one boob. Oh, is it squishy?
Oh, Monty, I thought yours was testicles. It's not.
Oh no.
And action.
Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patti, and I make this podcast with my sister Nancy. We grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We're also nerdy about history and culture, but critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we embark on today's topic of circumcision. Nancy and I have invited 3 trusted and courageous friends here today. One was circumcised as a baby, one was partially circumcised, and one was left fully intact. This is a deeply personal and often emotional topic, so we are so grateful to them for being here with us and being open and honest today. Circumcision is a practice that can leave a lasting impact, physically, emotionally, societally. And we're here to talk about it all. Let's get to it. So I so appreciate that all of you 3 are willing to be here with us today for this topic. Because as you may know, we've been working through on the Apostate Sisters channel for season 2. We've been talking about bodily autonomy and just all the various aspects of it. You know, I think in season 1, we'd done 1 episode that was about autonomy and just realized, well, holy shit, there's like 10 or 12 different topics that really should spin out of here. And so now we're doing those topics and realizing as we do each one, like, there's like 10 or 12 topics that could spin out of each one of these. You know, like this stuff just is so deep and it matters so much to who we are as humans. 'Cause like, what else do we have? So to that end, we have 3 of you here today because it turns out Nancy and I were born without a penis. Representing the fully intact team, we have Monty. And representing a partial circumcision, we have JJ. And representing a fully cut circumcision, we have Steve-O.
Steve-O.
And we'll be able to get a little bit into foreskin restoration also as a part of that. So kind of the uncircumcising half of this whole story we can speak to a little bit before the end also.
I have known Monty for a few years now. We met in college up in Minneapolis. Also a military veteran like myself, though we were never in the military at the same time. And you're also a fellow atheist. And I don't know how the topic of circumcision had actually come up. Maybe I was deep into that concept during college. Do you remember how it came up? But somehow I found out you were not circumcised, and I was like, what?
Yeah, you were. And you were like ranting about how nobody is and everyone in Europe is. And I was like, well, I'm fucking not.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not common in the rest of the world. Very small spaces. And all of the Abrahamic faiths, I believe, circumcise, right? The rest of the world does not. Yeah. Or am I wrong about that?
Sort of. I mean, in the United States, we do it or have done it as a matter of course, just routinely. However, it hasn't really been attached to Christianity. Like it never was. It only happened in like the 1950s that
Mhm.
circumcision became a routine thing done here.
Since Christians don't get circumcised, since it's not required in the Bible or anything, people have not only not done it, but used it to persecute other people. Like part of persecuting Jews in Spain was finding out that they were practicing circumcisions, and finding Jews in Nazi Germany was seeing if they were circumcised because they were trying to hide amongst the population
Right.
and say
Mhm.
that they're just regular old people. And there's reports of the Nazis asking them to pull their pants down. If you're circumcised, goodbye.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a way to identify them. But circumcision is mentioned in several places in the Bible. I guess there's not a passage that says you're actually supposed to do it, though a lot of Christian churches will promote it. And here in the US, they just do it automatically to babies without, getting any sort of consent. And like, I wouldn't like that either. Have my genitals fucked with, mutilated without my consent.
Well, and in the New Testament, there's even a sort of a discussion of the circumcision of the heart versus the circumcision of the body.
Mm.
And, noting that the circumcision of the body is not as necessary as that of the heart. So, I mean, that right there should, for those who are reading the whole book and still decide that they need to follow that after having read the whole book and understood everything that was in it, then, they should be understanding that that's just not required for that faith.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think any Christians in this country did think it was required. It sort of arose separately, but like I think along with like a purity message that was happening, right? Because it really was John Kellogg, creator of cornflakes,
Yeah.
who was this huge proponent of making sure all the little boys in the country got circumcised, because he was also incredibly against masturbation. Like somehow it became this thing that was just so bad for masturbation to happen. Like even we saw in our cult that Armstrong talked about that boys will go around like basically in a daze and being unproductive if they're whacking it all the time. And it was like, okay, but I think that was a pervasive idea at the time, right? Because when Kellogg was doing his thing and trying to promote circumcision to stop masturbation, he like specifically said to make the cut high and tight so they couldn't masturbate anymore. Like, okay, I know we have to get into the specifics of what that means, but it was in a time when he was selling his cornflakes and marketing his cornflakes to say, eat my cornflakes because it'll stop your red-blooded libido, because he was somehow trying to say they're wrecking their lives by being so hot-blooded and eating meat and eggs at breakfast, and it's making them so horny, so they should eat my cornflakes instead to like not be like that.
God forbid.
It doesn't really make sense. But that was the culture at the time of wanting to tamp down sexuality, I guess. So he advocated for A, eating his cornflakes, and B, getting boys circumcised so that it would make it difficult or impossible to masturbate. And there's a reason for that, because of how the foreskin moves on an uncut penis. So
and there's a reason for it. There's a reason it's there.
And this is where I start wading into waters that I'm like, oh yeah, Patti, remember, you don't have a penis. So this is my moment to talk to these 3 trusted male friends who are here with us today to find out about that.
And I must say, I mean, I wasn't able to get someone from Southeast Asia on here. I did have someone from Sri Lanka, a friend of mine, who was going to be on the channel. However, he felt he had to back out because he didn't want his Buddhist family back in Sri Lanka to know that he was an atheist. That's the reason. It wasn't because of the topic. But yeah, everyone in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, yeah, they don't do that, including my husband. My husband also has his foreskin, so I can at least, also speak from my point of view, like someone who's, slept with both. But yeah, should Monty start? I mean, he's the one completely intact here. I guess my questions for you, Monty, is when did you realize that you were actually different from the majority of other penis owners in the U.S.? Did you think you were the weird one?
Yeah, I did. Because I was the only one that was like that. I thought that you would like grow into it or something, like as you age, it'll just look different, and like that's part of puberty, is that part changing or something.
So
Yeah.
your father made the decision not to, correct? What was his reasoning?
Well, they both kind of did. They just
Oh,
didn't see
okay.
a point in it.
They didn't see a point. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because not Jewish. No real need to.
Yeah.
So,
What part of the country were you born in, Monty?
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Oh, you were.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
So I'm glad the doctors didn't do it automatically. They're not allowed to perform circumcision.
No, they have.
automatically.
I think they have to tell you, like, hey, would
Okay,
you like
good.
your kid circumcised? Oh yeah, okay, we'll go do it real quick.
Well, so here's the stories that I've heard around that. It's the idea that it became just so automatic, like just it was expected that everyone would do it. And so they would, at hospitals, here's a stack of all of the post-birth papers for you to sign. And in there would be the circumcision one, the approval for that. And so people would just sign off on it and not realize that was going to happen. And then they'd bring their baby back to them and it was done. So yeah, it's like, yes, of course they do need to have permission, or at least that's how we plan our system now. But when things are just assumed in the society, that doesn't always help.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm
And
proud of your parents, Monty.
Yeah, for sure.
You never had to experience that.
Have you thanked them?
Thanks for not whacking part of my penis off, because it's mine. Yeah.
Have you even talked to them about it? Like, a lot of people have never talked to a parent about it, and yeah, they don't want to talk about it.
No, that's just weird.
Steve-O, have you spoken to your parents about yours?
Oh,
Actually, I think you have.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Monty, you have told me on a couple occasions that women actually react differently to you.
Yeah.
When they go there. What's that been like?
Well, if it ever even comes up, sometimes it'll come up and I'll mention it and they'll be like, ew, that's gross. Or
they just say that automatically.
Yeah, they'll just be like, I don't want to. Like, that's weird. Yeah.
Oh, they flat out reject you before you guys even get to that point, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Got to say you dodged some bullets there then.
I
mean, I would say they just reject you for that reason. I don't think you want anything to do with them then. It's so interesting to me because now that I am married to someone who is fully intact and has been his whole life, for almost 10 years we've been married, if I see a circumcised dick now, I'm like, that looks strange to me because now I'm just so used to it being the other way, having the skin cover and protect it. I'm not used to it that way now. No.
Well, people are just weirded out by the whole, like, a bit of extra skin, like, oh, it's a little scrunched up turtleneck or something. Like,
But that's all it is. It's just extra skin. There's a reason it's there.
But this is just like all what we've made ourselves used to, because in Europe it's the opposite. Like in Europe, women will see an American penis and be like,
what the fuck?
And be confused because the head is showing, and to them, the head shows when he's hard. Right? Like if you see the head, it means something. And so it's weird to European women then to see the American dick and just be like, wait, it doesn't compute right away, So it's like entirely what we're used to and have normalized.
Well, that and the intact penises they're nice and moist, like they're ready to go. No lube needed, and then it causes less friction there. I'm sorry, it does. That's why it's there. And then you see dicks that are circumcised, the head of the penis is all just dried up, and in a way, like kind of pulls moisture out of someone, and it's then you need lube in a scenario like that. That's the difference that I've noticed.
My understanding from like the partner's point of view is that right? So when a penis has its foreskin, it's basically like pulling back and out of the foreskin while inside the partner. And so again, this is me saying things maybe I shouldn't be saying because Monty's here. But my understanding of that was that it creates less friction, so you're not actually sliding the
Mhm.
skin across skin. But additionally, like the head of the penis, without that foreskin covering, is more able to like pull the moisture out of the partner,
Right.
and so making the lube a little less effective also. So
And I
there's
can
like
attest to that. There's a difference. Oh yeah.
well, yeah, there's like actual mechanical reasons that like the penis evolved the way it did, and so yeah, this idea that we need to go back in and correct what God did is strange to me.
It blows my mind how many people get so bent out of shape about women getting their genitals mutilated. Like I don't know if they still do it like over in Africa or female circumcision. I'm assuming it still takes place in parts of the world, but people get so bent out of shape about that, and I'm over here. We do it to boys in this country all the time. Why don't you get upset about that?
Right.
You're like, don't just feel bad for the females. Maybe men don't want it done to them.
Well,
Let's
right,
feel
and
bad for the females too, because my understanding is that actually removes part of the clitoris as well.
I'm sure it
Where
does.
circumcision does not actually, I mean, it does remove part of the skin of the penis, but it doesn't remove like the glands,
Yeah.
like female circumcision
well,
does. So
Well,
let's be upset about
yeah.
both.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
What you said about,
For
but I'm
sure.
saying, yeah, don't forget about these people
Don't
here.
forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's the exact same scenario. It's just, a couple different genders here.
Mhm.
Shouldn't really be a difference. No one should have their bodily autonomy taken away from them. But there are definitely, it might not be, a clearest situation for men, but there's feelings in the tip, in the skin. Oh, yeah. You touch just the skin. Am I wrong, Monty? You got feelings in just the skin.
Mm-hmm.
So then I wanted to move on to JJ and see if you can give us a kind of an overview of your circumcision and sort of where you think of and stand on that right now.
Tell us about your dick, JJ.
So I didn't realize I was circumcised, or I just didn't dawn on me as a kid. I don't know. It just didn't register. I knew it was a procedure that was done. So I remember when I was roughly 11, 12 years old, and our congregation at WCG, they had a pool party event. It was mostly guys with their sons. I think there was some younger girls there too, but afterwards, I remember going into the showers and coming out, and there was a family there with the dad with his two sons, and I glanced over and I realized that it seemed like that there was something wrong with their penis, and it kind of freaked me out, and I tried not to look. I glanced once, and it kind of blew my mind. But what I realized later on is that they weren't circumcised, that they had everything there, but the tip was, kind of scrunched up, and yeah, I didn't understand that whatsoever. It took some time for me to actually realize that, probably like 3 or 4 years roughly, before it dawned on me that they were at WCG uncircumcised. It wasn't until I was in high school that I had a girlfriend for the first time and lost my virginity to her,
Mm,
and she mentioned something and asked me about the scar.
scar.
And in that, yeah, and in that moment, it definitely put me into kind of a panic a little, um, because I didn't know what to say on that.
A scar. So did you know you had a scar, or you just thought things were normal down there? Yours was a partial, huh?
It was a partial. So on the underneath side of the penis, from the frenulum down, or right at the base of the frenulum down to the top of the scrotum, there's a scar. And it's, I would say, the widest point is maybe 3/4 of an inch.
On the scrotum.
Correct, the scar.
How did that
on the shaft of the penis.
Like vertical.
Your operation was like botched in a way? They did something wrong?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I've tried to look up information on it, and the only thing I have found is a procedure that gets done for possible webbed penis, and I don't know if that's what I had originally, or if it's, a certain procedure that the doctor did, because our family, growing up in WCG, we didn't have primary care doctors. Yeah, I'm not sure if it had anything to do with just how he decided to do the procedure, or if it was like more or less my parents saying that they didn't want full circumcisions for us boys, because I have 2 other brothers. I have not spoke to them about it. I don't feel like I have the green light to go there. It wasn't that long ago that I confronted my mother about this and pressing her for questions. And most of the responses were, I don't know. It was too long ago. I don't know these answers.
Oh, shit. She knows.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I kept on reiterating, like, okay, it looks like this. This is what it looks like. Why? Yeah. Like, I went to that depth of asking.
And
so,
you got...
I don't know. It's too long ago.
And
Right.
I'm not defending your mother. I'm not in
Right.
any way. But also, what we know is that bodies are a completely different size when they're teeny tiny than when they grow up full adult size. So, and scar tissue does not grow the same way that healthy skin tissue does. And so it may be that at the time that it happened, it was a small scar. And as you grew, that scar tissue didn't grow right in the same way that it would have if it was healthy, normal skin. And it may look different now than it did then. And she may actually not know because of the difference in body size now.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, also to come to her defense, I mean, I have 2 other brothers. So, this is 46 years ago for me. Yeah. It's just weird. I have had some weird flashbacks over this past year when I've been looking at this, and I have this weird vague memory of a bandage, and I don't know what that means. It doesn't seem like it sounds logical that I could remember something like that, because I did ask like when I was actually circumcised, and according to my mother, I was circumcised within that first week. So I don't know, but I do remember that there was something around my penis.
Within a week. When do they normally circumcise? I thought it was almost right away.
It is usually right away, usually before the baby leaves the hospital, except for Worldwide Church of God. Even though it wasn't required, even in the church, they said if you're going to do it on the 8th day, which is, I believe, when it's done in Judaism.
That is so
believe that's
weird
right.
too.
Why? Talk to me about that.
To do it on the 8th day, like if there's ever a time where it's expressly forbidden, it's to do it on the 8th day, because Jesus is supposed to be the new covenant. So if you were doing it on the 8th day, you were doing it as the ritual that the Jews did, and you were saying that you were doing the old covenant.
Oh.
So you are not recognizing Jesus.
Yeah. And to the Worldwide Church of God, right? That was the thing, was to be following the old covenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
100%.
true.
Pretty close.
So that's why.
Well, I mean, you're
Oh,
still
that's
supposed to follow
fascinating.
all the old rules and everything except for the ones he
Mhm.
changed. That being one of them. He's the new covenant because now you go to heaven through him instead of
Mm-hmm.
having a relationship directly with God. And then he allows you to eat pork because he said it's not what goes into your
Bacon.
mouth, but what comes out.
Okay. Well, I don't know how much you've talked with Nancy about our upbringing, but that was one that was forbidden to us too, is eating pork. So it's funny the things that
And
our
and, and, and
church
Selfish.
decided.
shellfish and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got those convos. Yeah.
Yeah, circumcision is really interesting in that there are so many different types of procedures.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of different instruments that have been used over, history and in
Yeah,
different
yeah.
parts of the country and the world. Some of them are a clamp that where they have to like pull the skin away from because when a child is born with a penis, that skin is adhered to the glands, and so they
Yeah.
have to like peel it away. And then there's one of the tools has like a bell that slides underneath, and then they slide the skin up and clamp it in this bell, and then they may leave that on for some 2 or 3 days, or they may use a scalpel to cut around the bell. But that's just one way. There are many different freehand ways of cutting one part or another off. The frenulum does keep the skin retained up over the glands, but even just cutting the frenulum would allow the skin to slide down. So there
Mhm.
are some people who are intact but choose to have the frenulum clipped, and it might leave a scar a bit like what you're describing, JJ.
Mm-hmm.
And then the skin would naturally retract down over the penis, and over time it might just, if not retained up, it might find that it stays down and look not that different than a circumcised penis. And it might only be that the
Right.
frenulum was, we could say, removed or separated, right? And so that could look very different than somebody who had had that other procedure that, where a literal piece of the end of the foreskin had been removed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and all of these things are well within the range of documented circumcision procedures,
Hmm.
as I found out when I started researching it.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know there were so many different ways to do it. A friend of mine from
Almost
Guy.
up to personal preference of the doctor,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But
which
I.
is a nightmare, right? If that doctor knows one way to do it and they prefer how to do it, that's a bit like, when a doctor's closing a wound, right? They're going to stitch it however they want it stitched, or, however they're comfortable stitching it. And, you may not get a whole lot of choice because they may not know how to do that other procedure, even if you want it, right?
Mhm. Or they'll stitch it up the most expensive way.
Yeah.
Whatever gets the hospital the most money. Yeah, Steve, a friend of mine from Guyana, she has Indian background. She said that she circumcised her son by like slowly pulling back the foreskin, like used some oil and then
Sure.
like slowly pulled it back, and then she would clean it. She said, "Oh, that's very important to pull it back and then clean it." But I don't think that's necessary, is it?
There are
Just
even, yeah,
leave it.
there are even
No.
intact men who intentionally retract their foreskin so that no one notices, and intentionally keep it back away from the glands and don't leave the glands covered, because they find that to be, fitting with whatever aesthetic they, maybe the women that they're with choose to have.
What they're
Um,
used to. Huh?
and over time, the skin does sort of, lose its ability to slide back and forth, and it almost looks like a circumcision, except without a scar.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Interesting. Well, to your point though, Nancy, about the cleaning on babies, yeah, so when a baby's born, as we said, the foreskin is attached to the glands, the head of the penis, kind of like how a fingernail is attached to the fingernail bed, and so it has to be pulled back from that, like torn off in order to cut
Mm-hmm.
it for a circumcision. But we say we do it for cleanliness. And while I think that can definitely come up in old folks' homes, in places where he can no longer care for his parts in that way. That can come up. But for a newborn baby, all the cleaning that needs is from urinating. That foreskin will naturally separate on its own, and it's kind of best if it's done by the child themselves, because he's gonna know when it's time to make it move. He
or
can
just
figure
when they
that out.
discover when they discover that it does move, right? The body has done it on its own, and you didn't have to help it.
Right.
No,
So somewhere
I don't know
somewhere
what to
between
do.
age 5 and puberty, that gets figured out and loosens on its own. And until then, the urination keeps things clean enough. And that is how I read about it in all of the parenting stuff that I got into when I was trying to figure out if I would do this procedure to my child if I had a
I'm
child
glad
with
you
a penis.
decided no. Oh,
Yeah.
I
Patty.
mean, you should, wash it thoroughly and all that stuff too, especially if you're
Well,
gonna be
yeah. Y'all know how to do that.
a dirty kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently,
For
it's the
sure.
only thing people seem to learn how to clean. It's you wash this under the arms and you're done. No,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I mean, us
because
women.
I know that when people would think it's weird that I'm not circumcised or anything, it would be like, oh well, you're gonna get yeast infections and STDs and all that, and I'm like, I know where my shower is, so why would I?
Exactly.
Just
Exactly.
Mhm.
like this
Yeah.
isn't the 13th century anymore. I can just shower every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's
Yeah.
no different than like, a vulva. I mean, we have a bunch of
Mhm.
flaps that we need to go in and clean up, just like men have the skin they need to just
Yeah.
fucking wash it. So,
Yeah.
my husband is just he's so confused by this topic. Okay, so he's been in the US maybe 13, 14 years or so. He came here and he went to the gym once, right? And he's walking across and they're like these two old dudes. They're just walking naked, no shame whatsoever. And that was his like first glance to circumcised dicks. And he was so confused. Maybe he had that moment, Patty, that you mentioned, like the head of the penis is out. Why does it look weird? Because to him it looks weird. It's not normal. And then all of a sudden he's like starting to realize, oh, they're all like this here. So it's interesting to hear his perspective. He's like, he's just thrown off by it, and it doesn't make sense to him why everyone is so up in arms about cleanliness when it comes to foreskin. Yeah, wash it. Do you think men in India have a problem? None that I know about.
Just wash it.
Just wash that
Yeah.
shit.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Wash it and use a condom, and 99% of all the whole arguments about it go away. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna get a yeast infection or you're gonna have an STD. It's like, first of all, you can get tested. I know that, spending 5 whole minutes doing that ruins the mood and all, but you probably should do that. It's probably a good
Ruins
idea.
the mood.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes me
you
question
can
what kind of
you
move
can
were you
even
going for? Yeah.
I know, right? You can even go to, swinger events and stuff. They will have a van right there. You can go in the van, get tested, and go right back in and go do what you're gonna do.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that they have that.
Interesting.
Yay.
Yeah.
Creepy STD testing vans. I had no idea. It's not creepy, I know.
No,
We were taught to find vans creepy. Don't go in the vans.
No, it's the windowless vans, the white ones. Those are the creepy ones.
Oh, I thought it was
Yeah.
the blue vans. Okay.
blue?
With
Why?
the bubble
Why
window.
blue?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
From the 70s.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
what I'm picturing too.
But if it's one of those Volkswagen vans, then you absolutely get in those. The
Yes. There's always cool people inside Volkswagen vans. I agree
Yeah.
with you.
Absolutely.
yeah, those are just no-brainers. Just go ahead, jump in.
I just want to make sure that we let Steve-O give his penis introduction.
Tell us about your penis, Steve-O.
Oh my gosh.
Your wiener. Putting you on the spot.
So So, I mean, obviously, I was, well, as was said, I was fully circumcised. I don't remember, what day. That was a little before my memory. But I think the earliest memory I have about thinking about that was at some point, little kids are playing with it and realizing that I could get the skin to come up over the glands, and realizing that that felt so much better. And I was like, oh, this feels right, that the skin would be up over the glands. But I could never get it to do that, but I was little, like
Mhm.
less than 10, probably less than 8 years old. If I saw my brother's penises, they looked the same as mine did. So, whatever.
The horror.
Yeah. And so then, as I grew older, I realized that the skin was starting to get like a little rough, and I would have irritation between
Mhm.
the glands and where this scar was in the softer skin, right? That now I understand is more like mucous membrane skin. And that was always really irritating. And at some point it kind of got less irritating. And later, as I did research, I realized, oh, that wasn't actually good that it got less irritating. That was actually a bad thing, like for function, right? So probably in my 20s, I did a little research and I like got curious about, well, what, like I'd never seen, I hadn't seen that many penises, um, locker rooms and all that, whatever, but not many. And I started doing research about what an intact penis looked like, or at the time I was searching for uncircumcised, which is like the weirdest thing that we say, uncircumcised, right? As
Right.
if circumcised should be normal. But
It's the default.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
So when I saw one, in these pictures, I realized, wait a minute, that's why, like, I had that thought so many years ago that this should be covered, because that's how it probably was to begin with.
Mhm.
And along the way, I had this thought, well, what if one could get that back in some way, right? And so I started doing research about foreskin restoration,
Oh.
and realized that people, even as far back as ancient Greece, had been stretching their foreskin, what was remaining. And there were fairly well documented methods to actually increase the length of the skin that was there. And they came from, everything as varied as, in the Greek gymnasiums. Well, they didn't want this thing flopping around as they were wrestling or exercising or running or whatever. So they literally would gather the end of the foreskin and tie it with a cord, wrap the cord around their waist to keep it sort of in place from flopping around. Well, the those who were circumcised that wanted to participate in the gymnasium and
Uh-huh.
fit in, right, would do the same. And they used that as a method to also increase the length of their foreskin because of the tension on that. So that was a pretty quick result of my research about that.
Oh, so you've done this. You've done foreskin
Um,
restoration to
yeah,
try
so
to get yours back?
I've tried various devices and stretching techniques over the years,
Mhm.
and as I used those, this one of the surprises was that as it was covered longer periods of time, layers of skin sloughed off my glands, and I started to realize, oh, it looks more pink. I can like see the blood vessels under the skin. It's smooth.
Mhm.
It stays smooth, and it was just a shock to see it that way, because I probably hadn't remembered seeing it that way for a decade or more. So now I'm able to keep the skin pulled forward enough to cover the glands most of the time, and it stays smooth and comfortable. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
better.
after many years of stretching and
Wow.
trying different devices and you know different techniques.
Mhm. Yeah. Can I ask how you feel about your parents making that decision? Like, do you kind of feel some resentment towards them, or do you feel like, nah, it wasn't really their fault? It was just kind of the time period, and they were pressured into it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I do think that the time period probably had some to do with it.
Mhm.
I think that my particular parents probably followed a little bit more stricter ideas than they needed to at the
Mhm.
time. But also, the area I grew up in, that may have been influence of the doctor as well. I'm frustrated that it happened. Maybe a little frustrated at them, but that's there's a lot that we probably can't know for sure about that time period
Yeah.
and what happened. And that's, I guess I'm just focused on what can I do for myself
Right.
going forward at this point.
Right. No, that's a good point, because being angry about it won't make a difference. Maybe you can, yeah, take some
Yeah.
of your power back, and it sounds like that's exactly
And-
what you're doing. Yeah. Good.
right. And if they don't accept any responsibility for that and want to talk about it, then that's their responsibility, and
Right.
mine can only be for myself.
Thank you for sharing, Steve-O. Appreciate it.
I think Steve-O brought up a good point there when it comes to looking at this whole circumcision thing, especially in America, that it seems very regional too. As
Hmm.
like maybe it was across the whole country, just always done. But I think now, as there's been, quite a large movement of people saying, "Hey, this isn't what we should be doing to innocent babies' bodies." It's had varied results across the country. And so I happen to know that Steve-O comes from Michigan, and Michigan is still the highest rates of circumcision in the country.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Kellogg was his he ran a sanitarium in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So
There you
if we
go.
want to talk about
Oh.
regional, like I just luck of the draw happened to grow up in the state where he would have had a lot of influence in medical schools
Mm-hmm.
during the decades before my birth.
Okay.
Wow.
So let's add that factor into to my experience, right? But were I to have been born in California or Oregon or Washington, somewhere,
Mhm.
like the chances are a lot lower even in that time period, because there were fewer people pushing that idea in the
Just to
West.
clarify, okay, so Steve-O, I know you have very religious parents, right? Like sort of evangelical parents.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And that might have been a factor.
Mm-hmm.
JJ, you grew up in Worldwide Church of God, right? So you had that background. And Monty, were your parents religious? I don't remember.
They were the spiritual but not religious type. So
Okay.
there was a lot of crystals and
That's pretty,
Course of
yeah.
Miracles books and all that stuff.
Oh,
And
okay. That might explain
and
your
then my
interest.
aunt and uncle were the hardcore evangelicals and all that.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to
And
see how religion was a factor for all of you. Okay. If at all.
they were Catholics and
Mhm.
Methodist and all that all over. But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a very interesting thing to point out. Yeah, it's fascinating to look at all the factors going in. The history of who was promoting this idea and why. I mean, that's another thing to talk about, is like, why was this promoted? We know that there was all the purity stuff, and Kellogg had some issues and didn't want anybody masturbating.
And also buy my cornflakes, pay me
And
money.
also my cornflakes, because you won't want to masturbate after you eat my cornflakes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, so yes, there was all of that going on, but I think we have to be really honest about the fact that as soon as that's promoted, well, the hospital's making money off of that,
A
Oh, yeah.
lot.
and so once something is an industry, I think then it becomes, takes on its own life and wants to promote itself. And so we're kind of stuck in that it's not going to get replaced with something else to replace the hospital's income over that. And so to me, that just says, why would they ever stop wanting to do it?
Yeah.
Even the American Association of Pediatrics, won't go so far as to recommend against it, even though they've been hammered for a good 15 years now by intactivist groups who would really love the American Association of Pediatrics to come out fully against it. But
I don't understand why this procedure is still being done with everything that we've done. Oh, sorry. I keep getting messages. I apologize. We've come so far in bodily autonomy, the topic, and yet we're still doing this without people's consent. It drives me crazy.
Well, but
Oh.
it's people who can't defend themselves at the
That's
time.
the problem. Yeah.
And by the time they can defend themselves, it's so long since the procedure occurred that in some cases the doctors died, right? Not so they can't sue them for malpractice. There's no laws allowing them to, to take any action for themselves. And the parents who did it have probably feel guilt at worst and, frustration at the least, because it's been so much time. So it's one of these things where we need somebody to be defending the least of us, right? At their most literal, most vulnerable. But there's very little financial incentive to do so. And a lot of financial incentive on the part of the medical establishment or those in the medical establishment who still accept this, right, to continue doing it because they're making money off of it. So those factors really are financially against making a lot of change in this area.
Well,
Most
not
definitely.
only is it financially against it, but also the whole, if you're circumcised, then it'll help prevent against AIDS. And especially with how big the AIDS epidemic was.
When did that shit start?
Like
so
the late 70s, early 80s.
There was this study, and it was done in Africa. And not to say that Africa is significantly different than here, but AIDS was happening in that area at the time. And so there was a study done about like the transmission of AIDS in people circumcised and not. And they found that those who were circumcised had a lower rate of infections with AIDS. But like there are and were significantly different sexual practices in place in Africa and sexual norms. And teaching about condoms is very different in Africa than the US and was at that time. And so like to make direct parallels and to make direct conclusions about, what should and shouldn't be done in every part of the world based on that very selective study. There's a lot of criticism, even in the medical community, about whether those parallels should be made directly because of that particular study. Now, there are people with money, wealthy philanthropists who are diving into that study and saying, hey, let's spend a bunch of money in Africa to encourage circumcision and encourage other things rather than distributing condoms. And
you don't want to call out Bill Gates by name for that?
Oh, well, sure. I mean,
okay, because that's who's doing it.
Let's say
the Catholic Church.
Let's say that he's the Catholic Church, sure, but they're not the only ones either. And I don't know all of them, but that conceptually, it seems like that is an unfounded idea to me. But once somebody with money has it rolling in a particular direction, it's pretty difficult for people with better ideas to disagree with that much money. So, yeah.
And then it looks like he's doing something good. So that's
because he's claiming that he is doing something good, and who can argue with him because he's got enough money that he's probably, like, to most people's way of thinking, he's probably right. He's probably done his research. He's probably following research, but
is he following his insecurities? Sorry.
Hard to know, right? Or is he just trying to look like he's doing good in the world and found something that people can emotionally, connect with and hey, let's do good in the third world country, right? Yeah. I'm not sure that I feel like Americans telling third world countries better better ways to do things has really worked out all that well for the world.
Maybe
When
know
it
how not
comes
do it.
to, like, say, I'm just going to use the example of men in America here that are circumcised. Do you think maybe they, in a general sense, sometimes want to avoid the topic because they don't want to be told that there's something wrong with them, that maybe women might be more sexually gratified if they actually had their foreskin, because it wasn't their fault that it was removed. And I'm not necessarily saying that it is better with foreskin. I'm saying that for my situation, for sure. I notice a big difference, but I'm not saying that for all scenarios. Some people have told me they don't notice a difference at all. And I just wonder how
I've talked to
that
women who've
feels
been
to
with
them.
both, and they do prefer it cut, like the actual feel of it.
I just remember when I was in my 20s, and there would be times that I was hanging out with the girls, and like within our group of friends. And at one point there was talk about boys and all, and the whole circumcision topic came up, but it was more or less them asking each other what you thought of it, because I think one girl was actually like saying that they were kind of grossed out by an uncircumcised penis, and I think one other one, she didn't really have an opinion, and so they end up asking me if I was circumcised or not, and I said that I was. But it was just interesting hearing a girl's perspective, like within a group at that time.
So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, but every person to every person is going to be
Right.
a preferential thing. Like I actually think it gets a little gross when you're like, oh, I like this kind of, I don't know.
Like if they've been with people who are circumcised or whatever, and they only last 2 minutes, and we have more feeling, how long could we possibly last? It's going to be 10 seconds. Why even bother?
And there are a
That's
lot of misconceptions around that, right? A
I
lot
was
of
gonna
misconceptions.
say, yeah, I was pretty
Mhm.
sure that I had heard the opposite in how that works, but because of like an overstimulation factor when the head of the penis is out all the time. But
I know from my experience, as I've matured and gotten older, and I have come more of aware of my body, and I would say the age really has a lot to do with how long you're actually lasting versus just stimulating, whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised. That I would think that would have a lot more to do with how long a person lasts.
I will say this in my personal experiences. Again, I'm not speaking for anyone else. Men that are intact, because again, my husband is, they're, let's just say, easier to please. Like you can tell they feel everything. Whereas I've been with others that have been cut, it was harder to get them off, so to speak. It was harder. Things needed
But
to.
that may, I mean, the thing I said earlier about the keratinized skin on the glands,
Mhm.
right, reduces the sensitivity. And so, yeah, but it can really depend on, the level of that and other factors.
Right.
well,
Mhm.
Monty was mentioning that like, oh, if it's more sensitive, they're gonna blow their load faster. But I don't think that's the case. I think that's what
Yeah.
people think. But I
Yeah.
think it's more that the sensitivity gives the owner of it more ability to like know where they're at in the process and control that process, right? Start
Mhm.
to finish.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
That was how I always took
that
that.
reaction from that woman who's making an assumption about you without talking to you, without asking you your experience, without asking you, your literal feeling about this, that's more of a problem that she's not having a conversation about it than the actual foreskin.
Women are taught it's gross. Like
Yes.
it's some sort of stigma, especially in the US. I mean, oh, that's gross. Who is that actor? Who played Alexander the Great? Colin Farrell, right? I think he had an interview once, and some women were talking about foreskin being disgusting, and he just goes and whips his dick out. He's like, "What? It's just extra skin." And I mean, look at people, men like him, men like Gerard Butler. They have no problem getting women. They're both intact. So is like the majority of the rest of Europe. So I don't hear those women complaining at all. And not just-
I think that it's gross probably is locker room talk, right, among women, and not based in as much experience as we might expect. But also sort of like stereotypical pressure tactics. It's a bit of the Mean Girls syndrome where somebody says it's one way and nobody wants to argue with them, right?
Kind of, but I think it's also a thing that's foisted on women. Like women are told this because our society decided that we wanted men cut, and that was how it got normalized by wealthy white men who think that because that's how everyone should have it. Women got told that, and since women for so long have had to get their power by the men they attach themselves to, then you're gonna try to attach yourself to one that's like in the club, which apparently was the circumcised one. It's an othering, right? Like we keep finding these things where things are used to other people. And if you can keep more women in control by making sure they don't go for men that aren't circumcised, like, yikes. I think circumcision also got kind of a sort of a rap as like being dirty or low class, to be uncut, because it started to become fashionable, right? Like I think it became fashionable before it became before it became routine.
Oh, fuck.
Right? Well, no, right? So
I have a friend who said I'm uncircumcised because my family couldn't afford it.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Or I've heard the hippie analogy too, like, oh, I'm uncircumcised because my parents were just hippies. Yeah.
Okay, so when I was a kid, Nance, I remember our dad trying to make a case to say that more uncircumcised men raped women.
Where in the actual fuck does he get that statistic?
Well,
I don't
if there's just more uncircumcised people, the numbers would naturally be higher. But it has nothing. I guess he's just trying to make it sound like that's why.
Right, but correlation does not equal causation.
Right. I mean, yeah. And when I was hearing that as a kid, it was like also somehow attached to rates of circumcision by race. So, I mean, there was like a whole layer of WCG underhanded, let's just use that circumcision thing to vilify people and to vilify potentially Black people on purpose. Like, I mean, the layers of bullshit that we use to other people, and then when it starts with taking away someone's bodily autonomy and then like vilifying them based on what was done to them as a baby or not, like, holy moly, we are not doing right by each other as humans.
When did this concept even start? How far back does it go? You think I'd know, but I don't know how clear records are, but when did they actually start doing it?
600 or 800 BC.
And why? Why did they start doing it?
Covenant with God, Judaism.
Okay, so it was very much...
And it actually was more of a cleanliness issue back then, when you're only taking a shower, well, not a shower, a bath twice a year. Mhm.
then yeah, they probably would have gotten infections. They weren't as
Oh,
clean
yeah.
back then. So they, even women in Egypt, they shaved their heads all the time. I mean, the men did too, but to avoid things like lice and other like diseases, they would shave their heads. It was so fucking hot there. Yeah, people just did what
Yeah.
they had to do to adjust to, the climate.
Where they lived.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it a wonder that humans made it to here at
Hmm.
all, you guys?
Well,
Well, and look
and
at the
like
state of us now.
you think about circumcising in that time, like how many could have gotten infected and died early because they didn't understand about infections.
True.
All the things God said, and wash your hands was not one of them.
Right? Why could they not have included that one in the Bible?
Right? You'd think that'd be the first thing that God would have told Adam, like, here's how you wash your hands. Here,
Right.
you know.
You make a good point, though. Like, if having a foreskin meant infections and potentially, causing people to die from that, like, wouldn't doing a circumcision also have done that? Like, actually
Right.
cutting something and expecting it to heal without, like, neosporin and antibiotics and all of that?
Well, one of the main problems is so many people died in infancy that you wouldn't really be able to tell if it was
Yeah.
dying because of the circumcision or
Right.
because you're in the fucking desert and it's a baby. That's why everyone thinks that in the Middle Ages you only lived to 30. You didn't, but so many babies died that it brought the whole average down.
Mm.
You'd have to
That's a
have 12
great
children to have 4 survive.
Yeah. So, yeah. Some cultures wouldn't even like name you until you're 4.
There are so many things that I hear about from the past. It's like, we have no idea at all how hard it was to be a human before the now. And right now is pretty hard. I mean, wow, guys.
If they're really concerned about purity culture, we should bring the Scopsies back.
Bring the
Say
what
that
back?
again?
The Scopsies, they were a Russian cult. They did not circumcise people; they castrated them.
Oh God.
Completely, everything, totally smooth like a Barbie doll.
What?
Castration.
Not even boobs. They would cut them all off in order to not have temptation.
Oh,
Yes,
What?
just
cut off
all of it.
identify.
All
Men
gone.
and women. Is that
Snip,
what you're
snip.
saying?
Yep, men and
Wow.
women. Just snip, snip. And they would have like a little horn that the men would use to put against it so they could pee because they don't have a penis anymore. Yeah. But hey,
Oh
they
boy.
won't be tempted, so if that's really their concern, just chop away.
Oh, castration.
Okay.
Whole nother
Yeah.
level.
What is the name of this group again?
Scopsy.
I don't know.
I
them either.
Scopsy.
I feel like I've seen many people groups do things that are just kind of head scratchers to penises, and I've never quite understood why it was that humans over and over just feel like they need to do strange things to that poor appendage.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
They were wiped out by Stalin in the 20s, so you can even see pictures of what the members looked like after they got it all cut off.
Oh, I'm
Wait.
gonna look that
Wikipedia.
up.
So did they reproduce?
No, you
Okay.
joined as an adult, and they're like, "All right, you sure you want to join? Okay, snip."
They knew that
Okay.
was going to happen.
Yeah, they were adults. All the people that joined were adults.
And that's what was a religious thing?
Yeah,
A Christian
could-
sect or what?
yeah, a Christian sect.
I'm gonna weirdly stand up for that because it sounds to me like that was fully informed adults walking into that situation and giving their consent
Yeah.
for that to happen. Like, as much as it makes me go, what?
But were they brainwashed up to that point? They thought this was something special they were doing, kind of like a cult. That's
But-
how you reel people in.
Well, they were a cult, but they weren't babies. I mean, I guess you
Oh.
could make a case that people were being taken advantage of mentally if it's a cult, but like, when we're talking circumcision, that's like the biggest thing I have against it. Like if a dude is a grown up and he's like, you know what, I actually want it to look this other way, like have at it, dude. But like not to a baby that isn't choosing it for
Right.
themselves. So that's why like this story, as horrifying as it is, Monty, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, but they all at least chose it for themselves.
The other
You know,
person I wish we had here was someone who willingly circumcised themselves and kind of see to be like, okay, what was it like before when you were intact, and what is it like now? You know, what's the difference? Do you feel like because I want to see someone who like made that decision to circumcise and see what the actual difference was. Like compare the two. You know, as a woman, I can speak, from my sexual experience is the difference, but I don't know personally, and that would feed my curiosity for sure. Like
right.
Monty, you have no idea what it's like to have sex with a circumcised dick, like you don't know anything different. And that's the
I
element that I wish I could get to, and vice versa for you guys as well.
I definitely remember reading, in some of my restoration research, reading about people um, who had been circumcised as an adult and then immediately regretted it because even after, like they did it because they wanted to marry a Catholic woman and she wouldn't marry him if he wasn't circumcised, or somebody that just insisted on it, and they really wanted to marry them, and so
She didn't know what she's missing.
well, but she wouldn't have. I think, like, I even read a story about she wouldn't have sex with him if he wasn't circumcised, and so he did it. But then, like, once he did it, she didn't like the way it looked, and so then she didn't marry him anyway. And so then he went and restored. He followed all these methods and restored, and then did that again a second time, having known how it felt afterward, and again regretting it and restoring a second time.
Move on, buddy, move on.
Yeah. I
Not worth
mean,
it.
we should spend more of that effort of removing foreskins from tiny people to helping people from, tiny to adult be well-adjusted humans and know how to interact with each other in the world and know how to be safe and healthy in the world instead.
Pats, I know our mother, somehow we got to that topic and we asked her, well, like, why did you circumcise our brother? Because they had 3 daughters, 1 boy, and they circumcised our brother. But the only reason she gave was that, you need to clean it. I don't think any other explanation other than that. You need to clean that shit. Okay, well, the rest of the world knows how to clean it, so.
I mean, you realize there was this time period for the last, whatever 100 years, as doctors have elevated themselves to make everyone, think that they're just gods about everything. And so we just heard that that's what the doctor said. Circumcise to keep it clean so it doesn't get dirty, and nobody wants a dirty dick, so of course we did it, right? But Nancy, you brought up our brother getting circumcised, and that actually is a story I wanted to make sure that we talked about today, because I feel like it was impactful. I was 4 years old. I was 4.5. You would have been a toddler. You would have been 2.5. And we grew up in the Worldwide Church of God. Our little brother was born. And so on day 8, we went back to the hospital to have that circumcision done, and to maybe everyone's surprise, we were in the room for it.
How was that?
And well,
I don't remember that, but
yeah, you would have been too little, and it's been sort of a strange thing where I feel like I always knew that I was there and I remembered part of it. But I would say, over the last year that we've been doing Apostate Sisters, I've had a lot more time to think through things and just try to think through some of these experiences. And a whole lot more has kind of come up for me about what that day was like. Because I remember being right up near the table. Like, I remember seeing the baby on the table. And what I'm recognizing happened is I saw the procedure start. I saw blood. I was screaming that they shouldn't be doing that to him.
You
And
were
I
there
was
for my little brother.
taken to the corner of the room and spanked to be quiet.
Because
mean-
you showed concern for your fellow humankind.
Well, my
Someone
little
who
baby
was hurt.
brother that I loved was laying there screaming his head off. What else was I going to do?
And
You
that's
know?
still out for you, huh?
And I remember even then knowing or having it told to me how important it was that we did it, because we had to do it even though it seemed like this awful thing, because screaming and blood, but God told us we had to do it. Oh, I knew already at that point that we were doing this awful thing because God told us we had to. And that,
The life of servitude.
Right. So, I mean, we've been covering so much about autonomy in the sense of how churches can convince us not to do, or can convince us to do things that are not in our own best interest, can convince parents to treat their children in a way that the churches tell them it's love, when in fact it's abuse. You know, so I feel like that example is maybe just one more that I have in my head about how that looked, where this God that loved us needed us to do these terrible things.
Wow. That kind of reminds me of JJ's situation. Now, I just don't think there's any way that you could have possibly remembered being circumcised, JJ, but somehow you get flashbacks about that scenario in a similar way. Like these
It's
traumatized
just like a one
images.
single frame in my brain of seeing a bandage around my penis. That's all I remember. Just a fuzzy picture in my head. I just remember seeing like some kind of little gauze wrapping around it. That's it.
I remember a friend of mine from Africa. So this must have been the same time period, Monty, as when I was kind of having this conversation with you, because it was at the university we all went to. And we were discussing it, and he said, oh, he's grateful to his parents for circumcising him because he wouldn't have liked going through that as an adult. Like, he's just happy they got it done and over with, so he didn't have to experience it.
I've heard that too, as though people think that you have to.
Because they don't remember it. And so all of a sudden they think, oh, they did a favor. They just took care of that shit.
Yeah, because again, they think that in order for it to be, sanitary and for you to not get STDs and all that shit, instead of getting tested like a responsible fucking person, you just get it cut.
Yeah.
And guess what? STDs are not going down because of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
They're spreading like crazy.
Well, see, I always worried that putting this idea that, being cut reduces your chances of STDs could backfire if people get cut and think, well, great, now I'm immune.
Oh yeah,
And then
they're
don't wear a
under the impression
condom.
that it's basically 1 in 1,000 chance.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought the reason they said that was because it's maybe like a little easier to get a condom on if it's cut. But I think it's causing like the opposite effect of people thinking the fact that it's cut gives protection.
Yeah.
When in fact it doesn't.
And it's absolutely still possible to use a condom with an intact penis, but you have to teach that technique correctly, right?
Mm.
And if the only technique that health teachers are taught to teach doesn't include that, then a significant portion of your students are going to miss that message. And then, misinformation leads to problems, and people aren't going to seek out information in the heat of the moment, as it were.
Yeah, right. Well, right, because as I understand it, it's like you're putting a condom on a circumcised penis, you're holding the tip to make sure there's room for things to expand there, but then you're really just rolling it down. And Monty, would you like to explain how to put a condom on a fully intact penis?
It's pretty much the same. Like the skin can go back and all that, so you just hold the tip and roll it down like normal. Yeah.
Does the condom follow the foreskin when it rolls then?
Not really.
No. So
don't really have an issue with it or anything.
I mean, Sorry, from what I understand, when you guys are hard, I mean, the foreskin's
Yeah.
kind of pulled back anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, good
That
point.
it
Okay.
seems to be the case. It's pulled back and it kind of stays back, like it's ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. See, this is why this isn't just me and Nancy talking.
Yeah, I really wish we could talk to someone who has gone through the procedure as an adult and get that perspective. But
Mm-hmm.
for someone who's just never had it done, I mean, what do you say about it? This is what it is.
I approve of it staying that way. I always tell people if I ever think that I just got too much of it going on down there, then I'll go ahead and otherwise I'm leaving it.
I mean, how would that situation come up where you think there's too much skin?
No, I mean just too much. But joke. Like,
You're
oh, if
not
I
worried
ever wake
about
up
that.
and decide I have too much of it there, then I'll snip. There you go.
Like toenails or
Yeah.
fingernails.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take care of that myself. Thank you very little.
Pats, we have a female friend who she snipped up her labia. Is that correct? Like she calls them beef
Mhm.
tips. They were a little long and they got in the way. So yeah, she actually made the choice to, snip some of that back because they were just getting in the way for her. Yeah. But she made the decision to do that. So
Exactly, as an informed adult for
correct.
her own
She knew what she was
body.
doing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what person would actually circumcise themselves willingly, but maybe societal pressures. I mean, just like
Conversion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Conversion
Like-
for
If you fall in love with someone and they're Jewish, you have to be Jewish to get married. And sometimes it's only like a cultural thing, like, oh, just get snipped, do this. You're Jewish.
Yeah.
there's this creepy thing that Jewish rabbis I heard do. Like, is that sucking the blood from
Yeah.
babies?
Oh yeah.
Is
Some-
that
someone-
Been in the
someone-
news.
Yeah,
still a
someone got
thing?
herpes from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
did just read that. Yeah.
Transmission to a child through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I believe this is a particular Orthodox practice. It's not
Mhm.
Yes.
a common,
common.
practice.
Okay. Okay.
And it does get a lot of attention because, right, people are fairly rightly horrified by it. But, right, it's
As
a
they-
tradition in that one group of Judaism that when they do the circumcision, the completion of it is the rabbi sucking the tip of the penis. And I don't know any more than that, but yes, and correct. It shows up in the news every now and then because of the herpes transmission that happens.
How are they not sent to prison? I'm sorry. How are they not
I-
sent to prison?
I know this is such a weird.
Religion gets all kinds of weird passes.
Yep.
Isn't that the truth? Holy shit. Why have they not been paying taxes this whole time? That's what I want to
Oh.
know.
Oh, fun fact, I got a whole book on that.
I bet you do. You're an encyclopedia over here. The Divine Economy. Okay.
It's really good. I recommend it.
Good, good. You have a great book collection, Monty. Yeah.
I think it's really clear from the stories here and from other stories I've seen online that this stuff matters, and not everyone is fine with having been circumcised as a baby. And there are people who speak out against it. One thing I know I have seen when I was kind of in the intactivist world, like doing protests and things against routine circumcision, there was a group of people who would wear white hazmat suits that then had one big blood spot on the crotch, and they'd stand in front of a hospital that was, very much into that practice to say, hey, stop doing what you're doing. We're all here to say that it was done to us and we didn't like that. So there's definitely like the level of the conversation around it has been raised, I would say, over the last 15 years. And the practice is slowing down. It's not quite as routine as it once was.
Good.
There's a lot of people realizing this isn't just a thing we should do to a baby as a matter of, hey, you've been born with a penis, now that we're going to do this to it. And so that also means we're learning a lot more again, or reclaiming our knowledge about how to care for an intact penis. So things are moving the right direction. But I think it's as far as, not harming more babies, but there's a lot of aftermath.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of men walking around with issues. Either they get too tight when they get erect, or there's funny little tunnels that can happen in the skin from where there were stitches. There's just so many after effects of that surgery done on a tiny little penis that's going to grow up into a grown man's body. And we can't predict what that's going to do to it. And then because our culture is so toxic about what it means to be masculine,
Mm-hmm.
when people do experience issues with that, it's not safe for them to say anything,
Yeah.
Right.
because it
And it's
makes
difficult
them.
for them to get care for
Yes.
strange issues that may occur, because when they go back for care, the doctor's never seen that particular thing before because that was unique to their surgery. And so then doctors have trouble caring for them when things go wrong, and it's just compounded the issue.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've got these physical things happening to people, and then our, like, the psychology, the social aspect of it means that there's not necessarily emotional help or even physical help because people feel too trapped and can't say anything about it.
I'm actually surprised it's not a bigger issue that we're talking about. But again, I think it
I
goes
think it's
back.
hidden. I think
Yeah.
it's
It's so
hidden.
hidden. It's so
Mhm.
hidden.
Yeah, it has to be, right? I think a lot of people don't want to admit what was done to them too. It's not considered masculine.
Well, but also, like, the people it was done to were not aware at the time that it was done to them. And by the time they were aware, it was many years later. And the people who consented to it
Mm-hmm.
weren't paying attention, didn't look closely enough, and can't, sort of to JJ's story, right? Can't really recall much about it because they're probably blocking out that memory too. Who
Yep.
wants to have detailed memories of their child screaming, from an
Right.
early age? So yeah, there's a whole layers of the psychology of this that prevent us from directly confronting what happened.
Right. And then here, Monty didn't have it done to him, and yet he has women that flat out reject him before they even get down to that point.
Right. Also a shame.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
to
Right.
me, it all adds up to the story that we need to be respecting each other's bodies as humans.
Yes.
From the tiniest of us until we're old.
It really is
Like,
just that simple.
like maybe that means that people who work in old folks' home need more training around how to care for an older person's foreskin. You know what I'm saying? Like, if
Yeah.
that's the reason that we're saying, oh, we need to cut this off 80 years before that, like, no, maybe we can have some education around that and do better for our bodies as they age without depriving bodies of their whole selves for their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just kind of an undercurrent, I think, that probably actually adds to toxic masculinity in our country, because there is this really important thing when a baby's born, that they bond with their parents, especially the mother, and because that's safety, that's food. And when a baby is strapped down and has extreme pain, which we didn't even get into this, but the procedure itself, there is not anesthetic. Like, a thing they do is like, here, have some sugar water in your mouth, as if that helps, and so these babies will be returned to their mother after the procedure, and you can tell they've been crying so hard that they're like doing the heart slough thing, the like bad. Like,
Yeah.
mothers will say, my baby wasn't the same after, like, and so it gets in the way of that bonding,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is in a
Yeah.
moment when that tiny baby, like, their safety is about being right here on a mama.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not leaving out dads here, but breasts, milk, right? Like it's a connection to the point that babies' heads exude a pheromone that smells good to us as adults, and so it's there because then we keep them right here. Like,
Yeah.
keeping babies safe is biologically programmed into us. And to strap them down and cut off a part, their most sensitive part,
At that age,
when that
best
bonding
in the
needs to
world.
be happening and that baby should feel nothing but safe. Yeah, I think we are causing ourselves a whole society of psychological damage by doing that.
Right from the
There's
start.
There's
Yep.
another layer of that I was just reading about recently. And this is not just in children, right? This is, in any person, right? If like even a caring, compassionate stimulus is applied at the same moment as a painful thing, it can actually turn that caring, compassionate stimulus backwards on itself. So we can actually switch our association for that caring, compassionate touch or mother's milk, right? When applied at the moment of pain, it can actually switch that to a reminder of pain without us realizing it. And there's some psychological evidence to this that's only been studied recently.
Shit runs deep.
And so when we start talking about interrupting bonding, it can actually twist that, the caring, compassionate action of a hug or nursing, backwards, and cause it to be a reminder of pain. And if that pain happens early enough, the child won't know why they feel terrible about nursing, right? Because they may be making an association with this painful thing that happened to them. And it takes us recognizing that that's the stimulus that's causing this pain sensation, right? To reverse that. So who knows what's happening in tiny babies' brains when all of this is going on, and that interrupting bonding, how far that goes.
Right. It's like we've carried this idea that, like, oh, they're a baby, they won't remember. Like that. Well, you were just even saying that. Some guys will say, oh, I'm so glad it was done to me as a baby because then I don't remember. And I'm like, okay, great. You don't
I don't know if that's
consciously
really a good
remember.
thing.
Well,
Right.
no, I'm saying that it's the body remembers.
Yeah.
There's
right.
a book
That's
about
it.
it, right? The body keeps the score. Like, even if you
That's it.
don't remember, like, that feeling is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it remembers for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big deal. This is why this had to show up in our bodily autonomy series.
Absolutely.
Because,
Yep.
I mean, in some ways,
fucking
spanking's egregious, but it's not cutting off a body part.
Yeah. It's literally cutting off someone's body part without their permission. It pisses me off so much.
Yeah.
It affects everyone. And there's no benefit whatsoever.
That's it. That's what we're recognizing, is it affects the person who owns that penis, and it affects all the people who interact with them after that.
Yeah. And look at people who
And-
the circumcision was botched. Holy fuck. That's not something you can fix.
Well, and you're right about all the people they interact with. It affects their interactions with men and women, regardless of whether this person is a sexual partner to them or not, regardless of whether this person is their child or not. All of their conditioning as they grew up, all of the way that they learned to be in the world, to be treated in the world, to treat others in the world, is subconsciously shaped by that pain that they don't even know they experienced, don't remember. If we talk about men not being able to talk about their emotions, is some of that based in this? Like, does that come into play in, all of the people that they come in contact with in the world? We kind of can't know because it's difficult to study some of that because of the time that injury occurred. Autonomy is important, and compassion for everyone to find what works for them. Everyone's aroused by something different, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everyone needs to be able to understand how to find a safe place for acceptance, and we probably should focus a lot more effort as a society on each of us being able to find acceptance and having compassion for others, right? More than saying, ooh, that thing is other, right? We should be focused a lot more on what we all have in common and what we can all offer each other in common of compassion and acceptance and caring, and then being that to the smallest of us, and to the to all of us.
At this point, that's all we have. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, yeah, we could look forward and say, how do we stop this shit? But yeah, in the meantime,
But that's it, right?
That's how
Compassion
this is
for
how we
everyone,
stop it.
acceptance for everyone,
Yeah.
and autonomy for everyone, and this is how it stops.
But to get those things, we have to be talking. Like the fact that there's 600 plus people subscribed to this channel means that we're having that conversation, because nothing changes unless it's us people talking to other people and doing right by the people that we can actually affect.
And hearing everyone's voices, because it's like the people in the comments during our live streams, we get people talking. We all have different experiences. We want to hear those experiences. Yeah.
Well, right. And until we hear enough of other people's experiences, we're not going to know how to do right for everybody.
Right. Well, I think we got a good start today, though, with our collection of guests here. We appreciate you all very much.
Absolutely.
It's very brave to come on here to talk about your wieners. Appreciate it.
I know. I think it's so valuable, too. And the fact that we were able to touch on all three of you and your parents, like where your parents were at and kind of what led them to do what they did. I think that's really valuable to hear how that goes, and to hear how it goes now as adults, right? Because each of you have different connections and relationships with your parents, partially because of how they treated you as a kid in that aspect. Right. So it matters. It really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just being here and being willing to share about this topic at all is huge. So I really appreciate everybody so much.
For sure. We love you guys, all of you. Yay! Wonderful friends.
Thank you. Love you guys too.
Yeah, love you all so much.
Don't fuck with genitals.
Yeah. Don't. That's
that's what you do.
That's the only thing you should be doing with them. Don't cut them.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. You're worded back.
You should fuck with them. You should not mutilate them.